Okay.
And why did you stop that dance?
Oh, because I needed to invite you. Good evening, Singapore.
And good evening, Malaysia. And the
Yes,
world.
and the world. But Singapore is special because Go Ashok is here. How are you, Ashok?
I was actually dancing to that music earlier and I was like, let's go, let's go. What's the next one? What's the next one? But I
I
remember
can
we have a show.
I can put it on for you again, but we won't do justice to our guest today. So
Fair enough.
really, yeah. So I know you're fantastic. You can dance towards the end, provided we have actually taken everything out of our guest today. Anyway, Ashok, thank you very much. It's really lovely
No,
to
thank you,
be
Mother. Thank you.
to have you as a co-host for the second time, third time, officially second time, third time. Anyway, how's your week?
It has been interesting, actually. It's been rainy, though, here in Singapore for this whole week. But it's been interesting meeting up with new people and coaching and helping them. It's been fun. It's been fun. It's been
Nice.
meaningful for me. Yes.
Nice. As much as I want to listen to your story,
No,
and
no,
I
I'm not
really
important
have
today.
you. No, you're very important. But I have you. I feel so secured in my friendship with you. Now I want to secure the friendship with our guest today. So let's
Okay.
bring on our guest today.
And who is our guest today?
Hi, evening, guys. Hi, Mala.
Hello.
Hello. Thanks so much for
Hi.
having me here.
No worries, no worries.
Yes.
Okay, but Mullen,
Mm.
okay, I call him Avinash because that's what I'm reading, but you call him Nash all the time. So, tell me, how did you
I
meet this
confused her.
handsome gent? Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So
oh, so
why am I
Mullen,
calling him Nash? Is it?
yes, yeah, and how did you meet this handsome gentleman?
Oh no. Okay. Now I have to tell the secret publicly now how we first met, right? So I think it was last month. I think yeah, we were working with a client
Okay,
and they were organizing Roche basically, they were organizing their career day, right? So I was doing a session first. Of course, as usual, I was misbehaving. And I saw this good looking guy come and sit down there very seriously with his suit. And then I was also nervous lah because I know someone is watching me, right? Right? Now, and then after my session was a panel session, and this good looking guy comes and sits and takes his place. Really serious look, okay? And I was sitting behind.
hmm
And it was a panel session, and they were asking him questions, and then he opened his mouth and answered the question. It was so brilliant. Now, what I loved about Nash, because that's how he was introduced to me, Nash, right?
okay,
From the beginning. So Nash, I find it difficult to call him Avinash now, right? Now, and so what I really loved about him, being in the recruitment space or talent acquisition space is that I really enjoyed his answers because it was pragmatic. He gave context to every question that was actually thrown at him. And as I
okay.
was sitting there, I actually took down notes because I really enjoyed it. And then
hmm
I decided, okay, I have to have this brilliant mind on our show. And you know how I had to squeeze everybody's hands to get him on the show before even asking him. And then after that, I prayed. I sent him a mail, and he said yes.
Nice, nice. So, thank you very much, Avinash, Nash. I'll get used to it. Thank you, Avinash, for being on this show. Now, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and BTI?
Sure. First of all, I mean the name. So sorry, Mala. I mean, Aveenash or Nash is completely fine. Certain circles know me as Nash, certain know me as Aveenash. So both I'm flexible. So go ahead, Ashok, call me Aveenash. It's all good. And thank you so much, Mala. I mean, you're much too kind there. I mean, praising me for the session, but it was a really good session with Rosh we had. Your session was enjoyable too. Thank God you didn't force me to dance at the end. Remember that?
No, I remembered your face when I asked you, do you want to join? And he went like, okay.
And myself, so yeah, I'm with BTI Executive Search. A little bit of background. So BTI is actually under Persol Kelly Group. So we as Executive Search, what we try and do here with Persol as a whole is provide a very much a holistic experience to clients, right? When it comes to recruiting people, because Persol is quite a huge group. We have different sort of services we provide to clients and customers. So Persol has the temporary business, contracting hiring, permanent hiring, and where BTI comes in is more the leadership skill, right? We provide a much more different approach in search methodology. It's a bit more thorough, a little bit more specific, a little more targeted, and that's where we sit within the business. And within BTI itself, we have different sort of teams here who support organizations through specializations. So, for example, myself, I take care of the healthcare sector. So that's where I met Mala because Roche does fall under healthcare. It's a pharmaceutical company. Besides healthcare, we also have other sectors like technology. So we work with clients within that space, FSI, banking, also corporate services and supply chain manufacturing.
Nice.
So I think closely we have a team of close around 20 plus people in total in Malaysia. So that's quite briefly about myself. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for that. So this is very interesting. Malar, I like the fact that you brought in Aveenash because he can give us a different perspective about the situation on the ground also, right? So Aveenash, you've been in this space for a few years. And from what I understand is you've been definitely in the space even before COVID.
Yeah.
So you've been looking for leaders and you've been working with hiring managers even before COVID and even now, post-COVID. Let's just call it pre and post-COVID, right?
Yeah.
From what you are observing, right? Let's look at it from the candidate's point of view. What are some of the life priorities or the priorities that the candidates look for when they join an organization? What are they articulating and what are they looking out for? Let's talk about that.
Sure. I mean, there can be a variety of factors. I'll touch briefly maybe some of them that's quite common, I would say.
Yep.
The conversations I have in the past 2 years, especially. I think one of the first key ones we look at is a lot of candidates now are also looking at, does the organization value reflect my personal values? Right. So for example, let's say an organization, this is where we have discussions about what is the organization's products, offerings to society, right? Does this reflect well on myself? So this is where, for example, I'll give you an example. Let's say we talk about organization brands, right? We can talk about maybe HP, Dell, for example, or smaller organizations. Now the question is then, if I join an organization like HP or a technology organization, what is their reputation in the marketplace when it comes to being a working environment? That's one.
Okay.
Also, what is the perception of consumers and customers who view this organization I'm joining? Right? And this information, as we know, can be found on the internet in a variety of places, right? What customers say about a company, what consumers say, what do employees say. So all this information play a very critical role in terms of, does this organization value and how they approach things reflect well on myself? Does it align with my personal values too? Right. Other areas we look at is then we look into value creation, for example. So when I talk about value creation, I want to share about areas, for example, let's say if I'm a candidate and I'm making a move to another company, taking another job, one of the key things I want to look at is really what exactly does this bring value to myself? Why am I shifting companies? Right. So for example, what sort of skill sets am I gaining? What is my career exposure? Am I moving to different industry? Do I learn different new things? And how does this change impact my CV, right? Does this add value to my profile and CV if I apply for another job the next 2 to 3 years when I make another move? So the value creation there is very important. And I think the most common one we all talk about then is flexible work arrangement, right? Most organizations today are very much common. The clients we work with are in a hybrid mode. When I say hybrid mode, it could be 2 days working in the office or up to 4 days working in the office. But there is some form or level of flexibility offered by employers. right?
Okay.
That's very
Okay.
important. I think the whole strict policy of working 5 days from the office, it's being moved away. Not many organizations are practicing it, and the
Mhm.
ones who do, they are going to face quite a big challenge in attracting talent, right?
Okay.
And also
Okay.
retaining people, right? So if I'm working a 5-day work week,
Mhm.
and I hear my friends are working 3 days work week at home, and I want to make a move, I feel that's more flexible for me. So that's all part of the very critical factors too that's involved there.
Okay. Okay. So what I'm hearing is people are currently, right, the priorities have shifted where they're looking at the values, whether my personal values aligns with the company's, or company's values also align with my
Yes.
personal value, as in, can my contribution make an impact together, right? Am I doing the right things with the company? I'm hearing about culture, perceptions of the brand itself from the
Yeah.
marketplace. I'm also hearing about like anyone who joins a company, they want to know what's their career progression, their learning opportunities, and all of that. And the last part is quite interesting about the flexible working arrangement, right? And
Mhm.
that has become something very. You've seen that more these days.
Yeah, definitely.
COVID has definitely contributed to that, right?
Of course, yes, it
Okay,
has.
okay, okay. So this is what uh, candidates are looking for, right? So you got on one end of the spectrum, these are what candidates are looking for, and candidates have the means to research and find out more, right?
Mm,
Now on the flip side, then we have the hiring managers.
mm,
Now they've got their business challenges
mhm.
in a post-COVID world, right? They've got their own business challenges and all. So what has changed for them? What are they
From
looking at?
okay, the hiring manager's perspective, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think it very much comes on a case by case basis. So if the hiring manager is attached to an organization that offers flexibility, they are very much at a strong advantage of attracting talent, right?
Okay.
Versus another hiring manager who has strict 5-day work office policies. Then the question then is, how exactly do I attract a talent? How do I find the motivations and how do I meet the needs of the candidate beyond flexible working arrangements? Like I said,
Mhm.
beyond flexible work arrangements is not all and be all. There's a lot of other factors also playing a role in why candidates make a shift. So hiring managers have to be quite creative in their approach in attracting
Mm,
and retaining talent. That's for sure.
mm, mm,
Right? I
mm.
mean, there could be other factors also like toxic working culture. Right? You can be working in a flexible work environment, but you have a toxic working culture. Then there's politics in play. Those are all things also that take into consideration.
Okay, okay. So what I'm hearing is from hiring managers, they're also looking at this whole flexible working arrangement issues, right? Now, how is that? Is i- does it deepen a lot of conversations, or is that a deciding factor for a lot of people who are coming in and for managers now to start shifting the way they are working?
So from you're speaking again from the hiring manager, right?
Hmm. Or you can tell from both sides now. So I'm trying to hear from both sides as well.
Right.
I give you an example because I was just reading some statistics, right? Let's say, for example, in Philippines, right?
Mm,
They are passing more work from home policies at the governmental level because they do not want to lose talents, especially in the IT space and all of that. And they're saying, okay, let's even look at 70/30 hybrid working. So
mhm.
this is coming from a top-down policy in that sense. So in that sense, what are you seeing from both sides, from the hiring managers and the candidates, right? Because you talked about a lot about the flexible work arrangements, and I think that is one important change that we have seen in the last 2 years or so.
All right. Well, I think if you're talking about the organization perspective, so we as an organization, we work with multinational companies, we work with local organizations.
Hmm.
I think that specifically the MNCs, the US ones, the Europeans, they tend to try to roll out their policies from global level up to localized level also. So you see more flexibility in those organizations compared to local companies who have the autonomy to do their own work policies,
Okay.
right? So that's also shifting quite a bit between choosing an MNC and a local organization, right?
Okay.
But also from the candidate's perspective, not all candidates are also interested in working from home. Some actually do want to go back to the office, right? I think that's also a trend that's coming up. I mean, people, especially who have families, they can't really focus at home. There are
Mm.
discussions about this. Now, I think I operate best in an office environment,
Right.
right?
Right.
But
Right.
the flexibility may not be working from home, but it could be working hours. Right?
Okay. Got
So
it.
coming in at 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. So you can skip the traffic, off peak hours, go back home, work a couple of hours. So there's a lot of flexibility around that. Right? So, and that comes from much more openness and trust from hiring managers. So the trust has to be built, of course, between a manager and employee.
Okay. No, I like that. I like openness and trust. And yes, James Fong, hello to you too. And Muller, right? I know you're dying to ask that question about boundaries and flexible working arrangements and all that. Yes, shoot. Because I know we had an earlier discussion about this, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to give you a bit of context, also, Nash, we were talking about. I think organizations in the last 2 years they were in a little bit more of a predictable environment, if I may say so, work from home. But suddenly now they're coming back, and suddenly they're trying to decide how should we now operate. So I call it a flux area, and Muller had some views and questions around it. Okay, shoot, Muller.
Now I don't know what I'm going to ask, but Nash, I'm really very curious. So to dig a little bit deeper with what you've said, right? I love your clarity about the three things. So I could understand the first two, factors that you brought in, which is alignment of values,
Mm.
right? And personally, for me, that was a pleasant surprise because what I've been reading is a lot about flexibility coming up first, work from home coming up first as the candidate's preference. So if you look at, so I can understand number one, number two, value creation, because what is it in for me? How is this going to add value for me in the future in my career development? That I understand. It's easy for me to understand that. Now, is it in that hierarchy that you are experiencing where candidates are looking at alignment of values first, branding of the organization and association of the branding with themselves, and the value creation that it would create? Because your alignment of values and the organizational branding will definitely add on to value creation as to who am I now from now onwards to
Right.
contributing to my next job. Is that the hierarchy that you see? Or
Yeah. So sorry, I think when I shared that, I didn't mean in any particular order.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you
Give
had to
example.
put it in order,
Yeah.
what would it be?
It goes by demographics also, right?
Okay.
Different age groups also matter. So if you're looking at talents between the 24 to up to 30, early 30s, it could be flexible work arrangement that be one of the top priorities for them. But the ones of the older age groups who are well experienced, who are used to working into very much the older environment, are quite flexible to work in a environment that's not as flexible as before. Right, so their priorities is to change. It's different. It could be more the value creation. It could be more the organization branding.
So
So it
at the end of
demographic.
the day, sorry, at the end of the day, am I correct in understanding? And this is why I love your context, right? Whatever the reasons are for a candidate to be attracted to a particular job is really understanding the candidates, what is it in for me at this moment of
Yeah.
my life, right?
Yes.
While career
Yeah.
is important, but I could be having other challenges and I need something that actually adds value and helps me to fit in and really do well in my job, is what I'm hearing. And the reason I'm saying this is really because when we talk about flexibility, that seemed to be the top thing. And what I also heard you say when you spoke about hiring managers just now is that what is really interesting is in the beginning, flexibility seemed to be the top factor. But right now, as we come back to the so called post COVID, like Ashok says it, or in the new normal, people are big, that need for working from home seem to sort of die off a little bit. We are becoming more practical as to what is now working in my new environment. And some emotions are shifting, some behaviors are shifting, is what I'm hearing. And we are not
Yeah.
settled yet, are we? We're not settled yet, right? Now, coming back to hiring managers, you actually said, work culture. Now, and you spoke about, open and trust work culture, right? Now, if you look at open and trust, how do you find hiring? Because you talk to hiring managers
Yeah.
and you talk to candidates. And I'm sure with your kind of experience, when a hiring manager says he or she is open and trusting, and when they are really open and trusting. Would it be a fair expectation of your experience, right? So tell us, right, how does really a open and trusting hiring manager, what is it that you see in them that attracts them to the candidate?
All right. It is a very tough question because, to be honest, I mean, from our perspective, when we speak to hiring managers, it may be in one-two cases scenarios, right? We don't know how exactly they operate in the office, in the workplace, but that's when we need to look at the consistency of their leadership skills, right?
Right.
So if you work with certain clients, for example, if I work with a particular client for over a period of time, for over, let's say 12 to 18 months, I would know most of the leaders within the organization, how they operate, how exactly open and trusting they are with their employees, compared to working with a new organization where I may have some more questions, a bit more skeptical about how open and trusting this leader could be with their employees. Right. But I think when it comes down to it, any employee who, for example, is joining a new organization or internally, right, to get trust and openness, it has to be built. Right? I think that's most what leaders say. Yes, I can trust my employees, I can give them openness, but it has to be built over a period of time. So that has to be some realistic aspect to that.
Nice. Now, while I understand what you're saying in terms of what works in terms of the hiring managers, right? Now, how important is the quality of a leader for candidates today, right? Is there a shift that you are seeing? That means in the past, people may not have asked enough questions about the hiring manager or who they're going to report to, their leadership styles and stuff like that. Do you see that becoming important right now as people come back to work and you interview them?
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you talk about leadership style, I think the three main things we look at, for example, they want leaders who are more adaptable, um, also empowering, and I would say empathetic. Right, these are three main key areas I would say most candidates, or in general, we look at leaders today, how they need to be, or how they ideally should be. Right. So when I say adaptable, is that the reason why adaptable is so critical, right? For example, a lot of team members, as a team, not every individual within the team thinks, acts, and communicates the same way. Right. So leaders need to be quite adaptive in terms of how they manage each individual to make sure they foster a collaborative working environment. Right? And when we talk about empowering, this is where the conversation between the employee and the manager needs to be much more transparent, right? In terms of what exactly they need to achieve the level of autonomy or empowerment from the manager. Right? And we talk about then empathetic, for example, I think going beyond work today, people want leaders who have some level of good emotional intelligence, the ability to really monitor your own emotions, recognize other people's feelings, to build a positive working environment. Right, so those are the key aspects, as a leader, candidates looking for today to foster a working environment that's conducive.
Nice. I know, Ashok, you're dying, but hold on first. I've got two more questions, then I'll
No,
pass
no,
it to
no
you.
worries, no worries. Enjoy,
So,
enjoy. I'm
Nash,
watching this.
so tell me, right? What's a transition that you've been seeing in your experience pre and post in terms of how important it is for candidates who they report to in the spaces that you're talking about in their decision making. So if I have two offers, I'm a candidate. I have two offers, and let's assume they're both the same, right? Where does leadership as a criteria becomes a decision making factor for me as a candidate?
Right. I wouldn't say, I mean, in that kind of scenarios, to be honest, it's very, very tough to put a leadership as a top factor because, like I said, you only will know very well after 3-6 months into a job. It's hard 100% to predict how the leader would be, as maybe whatever a red hunter or recruiter could share as much as we from our experience. But beyond leaders, we look into things like career progression, right? And that's when I talk again about value creation. What exactly you get out of the job in terms of skills, career progression, how fast can I get promoted within an organization, right? What's my career track like? Right? Would it be accelerated? Would it be really slow within this company? Right? What's the level of competitiveness to achieve promotion? So those are the questions also we kind of have discussions about with candidates, right? What's your career track like in the next 2 to 3 years between your two offers? So your two options today right now, but if you compare them 2 to 3 years, where you think you see yourself, you pick one to the other.
Mm.
It's a lot of
Yeah.
reflecting on that.
So what you're doing is you seem to be helping the candidate make decision depending on what they want for their careers and based on what factors you know. So the
We
question I
know.
ask you, yeah, if we may not know the managers, but what I'm trying to get at is how important is it for a candidate today about the kind of manager or leader they report to? How
It's
important
definitely
has it
important.
become?
It's definitely very important. Definitely very important. But it's not one of the key
It's
factors.
Yeah, so it's yeah. And when you look at the hiring managers, right? I mean, you've been in the industry for 8 years, right? If you look at the hiring managers, how many of these hiring managers live up to the ideals of what our candidates want today, which is adaptive, empathetic, and empowering?
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's a tough one, man. Okay, put him in a spot.
Putting me on the spot with my clients.
No, no, no. Okay, no,
No, no,
not
no, no,
mentioning.
no. We're
No,
not
don't
talking
mention
about your
names
client.
and all. Just
Kidding.
percentage-wise, what you've seen.
Advice,
No?
to be honest, it's been good. Like, and it really has been. Maybe it's my luck, or I'm not too sure, but I would say 75% to 80%, right? Not huge complaints uh, from candidates.
I like the fact that you had to mull, take a seat back, and think about it. So, and 70 to 80% is a very nice number. So, yeah, thank you. Ashok, back to you.
All
Nice,
right,
nice.
thank you, thank you. Tia. All right, so Uttam Singh says interesting discussion. All the best. Thank you very much, Uttam. And we have Stella who says, if I may add on, the priority is really going to vary according to the demographics of the candidates, current situation, lifestyle, age, experience, etc. There is basically no one size fits all. Just like how every individual has varying love languages. Love language. Career priorities also differ. Right. Thank you very much for that, Stella. I think that is what Nash was also alluding to. He said there is no one size fit all, but he's just seeing a general trend. And I think he did mention earlier also about the difference in the demographics. The younger age group within the 24s to mid 30s or so, they have different priorities or so. Uh, let's go back to the interesting discussion about the leaders because you said what is important is trust and openness, and Malad was asking a lot more about leadership qualities, and you spoke about those three areas being adaptable, empowering, and empathetic. Now, this is what candidates look out for, right?
Mhm.
And would you say that this has shifted in the last few years, or has become more pronounced, or was it always there and now they're talking about it?
I think it has always been there.
Okay.
To be honest, underlying it has, but I think in the past few years with the whole pandemic situation, I think things like work and life integration is very important. So that whole dynamic has changed in terms of okay how important it is the leader should display these attributes compared to before,
Right.
right? But I think it's always been there. I mean, it's ideally nice to have a leader like that,
Sure.
um, but today I would say it's more important, more vital
All
than
right.
before.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thanks. And since this month, as you know, we are talking about retention, talent retention. So we've heard about what candidates look out for, right? And we've seen the challenges that the hiring or the organizations are having in that sense. Now, they spend a lot of time and money, effort to actually recruit these talents,
Yeah.
right? From your experience, right, what would be important talent retention strategies that must be in place?
Oh, no. This is a very, very difficult one. And I think every organization or HR, right, internally would have their own programs, their own retention strategies to really dive deep into. I
Okay.
think from my perspective, from an external partner, the way I would have this conversation with clients is that let's just look at the very basics, right, of what exactly motivates an individual. What motivates an employee to join an organization or stay with your company? So let's
Okay.
say, for example, if you look at maybe theories of motivation, right, we can just go to a simplified version of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, right? So let's say we take intrinsic, right? This is where we look at an individual on a very personal level, right? What would attract and motivate them? So some examples in this area could be autonomy, having a sense of achievement, accomplishment, and also maybe some sense of affiliation with the organization. So let's say when I talk about autonomy, right? Employees want to feel engaged, they want to be stimulated, and they want to have some sort of sense of personal development within a company. Right?
Okay.
Accomplishment. This is where organizations can look into. Okay, how do we reward good behavior, right, within the organization? Right. This could be things like it may just be promotions. It could be recognition from a manager to an employee, and affiliation. It could be that as we go back to the values in terms of what if are you affiliating yourself with as an employee, with a company brand. What sort of knowledge am I gaining, sharing knowledge? Am I working in a very collaborative working environment? This is more of the social element of it. So that's very much intrinsic. Right? If I go to the extrinsic, for example, then I'll look into things like security. I think any employee today wants to feel stable, secure in their job. Right? And this is where they then evaluate areas like, okay, in my company today, what is their hiring trend? What's the turnover rate like in my company? If it's a turnover rate is high, I may not feel so secure working in this organization. So then the security aspect is downgraded, right? It's not good. Then you also have, for example, the working environment. And this is when organizations talk about office setup, making sure there's some sort of fun element in the office. Do employees actually want to spend 8 to 9 hours in the office? Right? How do we motivate them in that manner, for example? Right? And then we talk about compensation the very last, right? So this is where retention strategy talks about rewards and benefits. So how do we attract people in terms of salary benefits, salary scales, fringe benefits, allowances, job perks? These are all extrinsic motivation, I would say. So from there, you can kind of center your whole conversation about what kind of programs and initiatives should be put in place for retaining employees.
Okay, got that. Now, let me just dive into a bit of the intrinsic motivation part of things. Okay, I'm not too sure what's the scenario in Malaysia, but I'm just speaking from my experience of having traveled around the region and all. I think for the longest time, most organizations here in the past tend to rely a lot more on extrinsic drivers. Right? Whether it's rewards. I mean, I know you beautifully put it down also as security and a fun environment and all that, but I'm just putting it down to very simplified carrot and sticks. It was a bit of okay, you do this and you'll get this reward, and if you don't do it, this is a punishment. Carrot and stick, very punitive in that sense, right? And yes, in the last few years, I've been hearing a lot more about the importance of even tapping on the intrinsic drivers within. Now, you spoke about autonomy. And in the kind of work that I've been doing, I've also realized that, yes, people say they enjoy the autonomy, but they do not want too much of autonomy also.
Yes.
They need a bit of a guidance, So this is what I've noticed in organizations. Are people ready to have a full-on autonomy? Again, I think this could be a bit of a demographics. Because in the younger generation, I realize, yes, they enjoy the autonomy, but they also like the Adobe markers and the coaching support that they are providing. That's from also part of the career development and retention strategies can be part of driving the intrinsic motivation and also the coaching support in that sense, right? Now, did you have any best practices that you can share without naming any clients? If you don't want to, that's fine. About how they actually drive this intrinsic motivation actually. Let's just look at one example of autonomy.
Sure. So autonomy, I think rightly so you pointed out, right? They don't want full autonomy. Right? It has to be a certain level of autonomy.
That's right.
And guidance and coaching is something very, very important, right? And I think one initiative, for example, in this way, when it comes to intrinsic motivation, why, like you mentioned, a lot of focus tends to be external in motivation, but now it's more intrinsic, right? So this is where we talk about leadership capabilities. And so a lot of clients are putting in management development programs for their leaders, right? So like you said, are the leaders before equipped to be leaders today? That's a question mark. So a lot of things have been updated, and I'm sure yourselves, probably being coaches, have also seen a huge shift in a lot of programs are focused on leadership development for today. So that's the most common theme I hear most clients putting in place for leaders to make sure that intrinsic motivation is driven from top down and there's consistency across it and is practiced well.
Nice. Yes, Muller is like looking. Yes, Muller.
Intrinsic. So this is something I'm trying to put my head together, right? About intrinsic and extrinsic, right? So if you think about intrinsic motivation, what sort of intrinsic motivation drives your candidates today? What is it? And I know you will give context to this for sure, right? I mean, so for example, like for me, when I work in the healthcare industry, I generally find that they connect to purpose a lot more easier, right?
Easy, is
So
it? Sorry.
yeah,
Mm.
easier. They're very much purpose driven in that sense,
Yeah.
right? At least in terms of languaging, right? Now,
Yeah.
so if you talk about intrinsic motivation, so what trends are you seeing? What intrinsically is driving candidates today?
Uh, let's just say, in that conversation, that context, right? For example, when you talk about having some sort of affiliation with a brand or organization, I think it's very important the leaders or the employees are in the same page in terms of why exactly does the organization exist, right? What
Right.
is my purpose in my role,
Mm.
and how then do I achieve in being successful in this company, right? So I think that's where the interesting motivation comes from. Is as long you're quite there's clarity around those questions, exactly why do I
How
why
do
am
I
I
make
hired
it?
for this position and what do I do in terms of responsibilities? Once that is clear, there's clarity to that, I think employees tend to stay within the organization and are retained much more effectively.
Nice. And see, one of those things I'm grappling with, right, when I see when I read reports and I look at the numbers and the statistics. On one hand, I think from the research data, candidates are saying, I want to be purposeful, I want to make a difference, and things that's really nice to hear. On the other hand, the top reason people seem to be joining an organization and what they are saying is that they are not paid enough. So they're talking about rewards, and we are talking about financial reward. So
Hmm.
on one hand, so what are your thoughts on this, right? On one hand, what we are hearing is I want a meaningful job, and that's understood. But on the other hand, what numbers are showing is that the top reason I joined the organization would be rewards.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do I reconcile that? I mean, help me understand.
That is quite tough. I think that really comes down to individual basis, right? What are you willing to risk? Are you willing to risk a certain level of compensation to go for a purposeful, meaningful job, or the other way around? And like you said, the trend does say rewards or compensation is one of the leading factors why they jump ship, right?
Mm,
I think that's again comes down to whole demographics, economy, reasons that we probably don't 100% sure of. There's so many other factors that come into play when making decisions like that.
mm,
Each candidate could be different. Some candidates just wouldn't really be too bothered about compensation at a certain stage, right? So I have a candidate, for example, who says, I've done all my investments, I'm very comfortable, I don't have any commitments, I paid off all my mortgage. Okay,
mm,
so what's next for you? Then it's just purely purpose, not compensation. I can willing to take a pay cut. But then again, there's
yeah.
demographics after a certain age group. For the younger generation today who want to have family commitments, who want to purchase homes, housing, I mean, we all know rewards and compensation is still number one in that area, right? But
Mm.
ideally, it's nice if the company can balance both. So that's what the Canadians are looking for, to balance at least both as much.
Yeah, yeah, because the expectation is for every job to pay what is fair to the role, and what
Mm.
is fair to the role is also very much in. We need to look at the context of how much of the physiological need is already part of that package, and
Ideally,
and I
yeah.
think yeah, I mean it's ideal, but we know the
Yeah.
cost of living is also very high now, right? So
Yes.
what is ideal is being shifted. So even though the salary might look more than it was maybe 5 or 10 years ago, but the
Mm.
kind of risk and the expenses has also increased. So
Yeah.
I can see the trend, but I was just curious. Ashok, do you have a question?
I've got a statement and then a question,
Okay,
right?
good, go.
Uh,
I give you chance.
no, back to the intrinsic motivation, especially about value. Okay, so this is what I have experienced personally, and also have observed works well, right? See, yes, when someone joins a company, one of the best practices I don't like the word best practice, but one of the effective practices I've seen, whether it's in the onboarding stages or so, right, is either they pair up as a buddy system, or the leaders within the organization, even the managers, are then told to always align their contribution to the impact that the team and the organization is delivering to the customers. And one of the ways they do that is they share stories that have worked well in the past. You know, And they make this a deliberate thing, part of meetings, whenever they meet up and share about how the contributions have made an impact. Because the value in that sense is based on what am I bringing, what talent am I bringing to the organization, and how am I making that meaningful contribution that I can be proud of. So are there stories that I can align with? Can I be part of that story in the long term? So this is something that I've noticed that not many, but some organizations they do this very deliberate from top down. And this goes back to the question, a statement that you made that I have a question. You made a statement said there are a lot of leadership programs that, with the intention of preparing the leaders, right, or equipping the leaders for today.
Mm.
So I like to expand that today and say today and tomorrow. Because say, case in point, let's say yesterday the Fed talked about increasing interest rates, right, to fight inflation, and we're already seeing some of the stock markets reacting to that. No doubt it's been already been priced in, but I think what we're going to see next year, 2023, right, and going forward, is a bit more tougher business environment,
Mm.
right? And I think that is why, yes, the leaders can be equipped with the strategic skills on driving these, but the cultural aspect is going to be extremely important, right? So
Mm.
when you talked about preparing for today, what other aspects were you referring to apart from business challenges?
Well, I'll be talking about leadership capabilities.
Yeah.
I think it's more on the soft skills side,
Okay.
right? I think that's coming from the point, as I shared earlier, right, about what exactly candidates or employees are looking for the leaders to operate. It's just very much a how do I build, I mean, put another context, how do we build a very secure environment for employees? And when I talk about secure, not just about purely external, but
Sure.
also is the environment that I'm building collaborative?
Mhm.
Do we also listening skills of leaders are very important, right? Leaders need to be much more better in terms of listening, also open to employees to have their own voice. Right?
Mhm.
So these are all things, of course, I think leaders of maybe yesterday need to practice today much more, right?
Okay.
And I think we all are still learning. You know, myself as a manager, also, I'm still learning in that space, right? I'm still also practicing those ideal situations, ideal skill sets
Mhm.
for not just today, but for tomorrow.
Yeah, and this is what you're referring to, being more empathetic, because I think when you talk about being open, listening, all this falls within being empathetic, being connecting to the fellow human being, right?
Hmm.
And
Yes.
this is what you were referring to when we first met about treating people as people, and that's why relationships are important, right? And yes, I know we use the word soft skill, but I don't know, maybe Mala, maybe that this word soft skill may need to be changed. Is it human skills, essential skills, important skills? Why do we divide it into hard skill and soft skill?
You're asking Nash the
I'm
question, right?
no, I'm asking you first before I throw it back to Nash.
Yeah, I've got a long, sad story about soft skill and hard skill. We'll see whether we can deal with that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. So since you're on that topic, right, Nash, do you see a lot of organizations still very fixated about the hard skills and not enough, in your opinion, about soft skills? Or you think they are now realizing and balancing it?
Oh, I think I definitely see a huge shift actually to the soft skills
You're
more.
seeing a huge shift.
Yeah, I think, for
Oh,
example,
great.
like most of the times when you speak to hiring managers, in my experience, is that look, I mean, skills when we hire for new professionals, for example, or we look at their level years of experience, their skill
Mhm.
sets, their past exposure. That's all on the profile, right? But what they really struggle for is how do we then hire for the right attitude for our culture, right? So is the person motivated? Are they highly driven? Are they self-initiative? Those are the conversations that I have with those hiring managers, right? So going beyond the work experience, soft skills is definitely very, very critical. And I think that's where we struggle. And that's why the timeline of hire is always extending because we can't find the right culture fit or the right soft skills for managers.
Wow. That means, oh, this is a very interesting thing.
And of course, I want to point out though, this, of course, again, this comes to sector basis, also could change, right? So my colleague probably doing the tech sector will have a very different opinion on this,
Sure, sure,
which
no,
is
fair enough,
more
fair enough, fair
hard
enough.
skills. But I know from my healthcare sector and other more soft skills driven sector, this is definitely a key point.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting point that you brought up, Nash, because you're saying there are struggles trying to identify the right attitude, right, to the organization in that sense. Do you have any examples of organizations, without naming them, don't worry, right,
Yeah.
that are doing or striving to do it well? I know it's a tough one, but are they striving to do it well?
So they are. I mean, they are trying to accomplish that,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I
Definitely.
hear it's a struggle. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a simple example would be an organization. Maybe they have their whole business model change, and then when it comes to hiring people, certain people believe in the change of the business model versus other people, right? So
Okay.
these individuals need to be adaptive. They need to be much more forward thinking, uh, risk adverse. Also, those are all the soft skills we look at in certain organizations when it comes to hiring managers, right? It all depends on the situation the company is in. But like I said, in general sense, yes, hiring managers tend to look at soft skills, and we are struggling in that area because the Malaysian market, it's quite tricky. I would say the talent is quite scarce in that specific area.
You mean to say
Okay.
in soft skills?
Yes.
We got work. Okay. We need to do more marketing because there's a need for soft skills. So thank you. Nash is like thinking, this woman gets excited every time it's emotional intelligence and soft skills. I'm going to have a go at Nash Ashok. So two things, right? So Nash, if you remember what we are in the month of September and we're talking about talent retention, I think you've given us a lot of context in terms of what we would probably categorize under talent acquisition, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's rightly so because we wanted to hear from your experience how the trends are shifting, right? Now that we're done with the acquisition, which was actually last month, right? Now, tell us, right? Because and that's how we came up with this theme for you. Why relationship matters? Because when you're talking about soft skill, when you're talking about leadership skills, you're
Mm.
talking about empathy, listening, being open, being trusting,
Yep.
right? Whether you want to call them attributes or whether you want to call them leadership skills or soft skills,
Mhm.
right? It all contributes to relationship,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
it really matters because once you have got someone on board in your organization, once they sign the letter of offer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now you go through this what we call probation period, and this
Mm-hmm.
is a very important period because this is like a whether I stay or not, this is the courting period, whether I'm going to get married to you or not, right? Because it's still probably engagement lah, huh? Now tell me, during this time, right, when the candidate has taken on the job offer,
Yeah.
between then and the retention strategies that organizations need to get right, either organizations or the hiring managers, so that firstly they can retain the talent that they have acquired to continue to contribute so that they become part of the organization culture. What are
Mm-hmm.
some things we need to get right?
Actually, I think Ashok did point out just now a very good point of the onboarding process is very, very critical, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of organizations today, in terms of onboarding process, they're also trying to revamp it as much, right? They try to make sure there's a sense of belonging. When you move to a
Mm-hmm.
new company, you go to meet new people, new colleagues, new leaders. It's quite a shift. So I think that building that sense of belonging through the onboarding process is very, very critical. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's very important. I think Asha pointed out also that people join organizations to really know exactly their responsibilities, what exactly is the purpose of joining a company, who are the leaders they report to, what are expectations like to perform within a company, and how to be successful. Right.
Mm.
So those are the things or conversations I think between employers and employees are having these days at a very, very early stage, right? First 2-3 months at least to know exactly how does this tick all the boxes. So you are retained and you stay within the organization itself.
Nice.
Okay.
What specifically do you see good leaders and managers doing in terms of building relationship on the onset of the working relationship?
Power question. Solid
Uh,
question. Even I'm thinking,
but I hope this is relevant. I mean, I think there has been more open form of communication among leaders, right? To be, yes, you have someone joining a separate team at a different department, but it's also important for those employees to get to know leaders in other departments itself, for example. So the collaboration between leaders and managers, the open communication within the working environment, I think is much more improved these days, I hear.
Mhm.
That's one aspect of it, right? I think other examples I can't really cite right now.
No worries.
But
Let
yeah.
me try and tickle your brain a little bit because I'm sure it's in there. What do you hear managers and leaders are investing more in to build relationship to retain the newly acquired talent?
To build relationship with their employees. So
Yeah.
what are they investing in?
What are they doing more? They might have been doing before because we're talking about already, you say talent is scarce, right? And then people with soft skills also scarce. Now you bring them into the organization. You need to make sure they stay in the organization for a bit so
Yeah.
that they can contribute. And you've also said how important the role of the hiring manager, managers, and leaders are in terms of building that relationship
Yeah.
to be trusting and to be open to retain the employees, to engage first.
Yeah.
First engage and then, hopefully retain, right? So if you look at what high or in terms of the stories that you've heard, either people who stay or people
Yeah.
who leave, you acquire them and you get them the job and then they will tell you why they're leaving also, right? So from
Yeah.
the exit interviews that you're hearing, or even your talent that you're actually acquiring for your clients will tell you the story of why they're leaving the organization,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Because my managers, people join organization, people leave managers, is what we say. Now, so from the stories that you hear, we want to look at good stories, good leadership stories. If you look at good leadership stories that you hear, are leaders and managers investing more in relationships? Number one. And if you say yes, what are some things that they are doing differently or more
Mm.
to show that they are investing in
Yeah.
relationships?
So to your first question, is the question, are they really investing? Yes. Now, I only can cite examples of my experience at the organizations I've
Sure.
worked with in the past or recently. I think two main aspects of it is, I think, looking at the HR business, right? I think
Mhm.
maybe when you are involved in the space, is that talent assessments is one thing. For us to really understand the underlying behavior traits of our employees, our team members, is very, very critical. Something that's not visible. So assessment has also picked up, I think, quite a bit, not just when it comes to hiring, but also for succession planning, also for growth, right? And then
Correct.
secondly, we look at learning management systems, right? So we know a
Mm,
lot LMS, industry is also booming a lot across Southeast Asia. And I think Malaysia in the past 2 years is also picking up quite a bit. So how do we create an environment that's always building on continuous learning for our employees, not just hard skills, but also soft skills? Right? So this is when the LMS, talent assessments, these are some examples that they're also focusing on investing in within
mm,
organization.
mm.
Okay.
So what I'm hearing is that we are looking at tools to support
Yes.
in terms of talent. That's what I'm hearing. And because people are interested in development and organizations are also interested in upskilling the employees, the learning management system becomes very important for us to upskill and stay relevant, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
All right. And how do hiring managers communicate these with their direct employees, or are they still dependent on HR to do it?
Typically, it tends to be HR
Mm.
that gets more involved in this.
Yeah.
Hiring managers, my experience, no.
Okay.
It tends to fall under the HR.
I'm going to ask you for a personal opinion now. Okay.
Yes, it should be shifted.
No, that's not my question because that's an assumption. Whenever we're talking about assessment and LMS, we're looking at the development of the candidate, i.e., engaging them, right? And
Yeah.
I want you to imagine, I'm sure you'd have some clients, the hiring managers are able to do it. That means they have the people skills and the management skills to do that. That means they know how to assess the people well, they know how to engage the hearts of the people or the candidate or the employees, and they know how to help their direct reports develop. Let's assume the baton is now passed to hiring managers, and hiring managers are able to do it.
Okay.
Able. Now, how do you think that will shift or impact talent retention if managers can do this?
I can only think positive. I can't imagine it being a negative view. It's just whether the managers want to take up that ownership. That's a
Nice.
question. It takes time.
Okay.
It's
Yes.
and then that's where the whole change agent comes in, to really increase that awareness among hiring managers.
Thank you, thank you. I'll
Sure.
tell you. I know there was like a trick question for you because I think you see, on one hand, employees are telling that they want to be connected with their hiring managers. They want to be listened to by the hiring managers
Mhm.
because it is my manager who understands my worth and my contribution.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things that you've said very clearly states what employees want, right? And on the other hand, we also know what leadership skills that is required. Yet, I think organizations are still dependent and outsourcing it to their uh, HR department, which
Yeah.
is where we are seeing the disconnect because our
Yeah.
HR doesn't look at what I'm good at on a daily basis, whereas my hiring, my immediate superior does. So I needed to know that from your space because we are saying this is the right thing to do, but as leaders we are not taking ownership of upgrading ourselves in that
Yeah.
particular skill is what I'm hearing, and I wanted to
Right.
confirm that, right?
But,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm?
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Last question, Stella. I think Stella Ho. Thank you, Stella.
Yes.
It's also very important for leaders, managers to be leading by example. And there have been a lot of situations when during an interview the leaders present their leadership style but go against his or her words. Thank you so much for speaking the truth, Stella. As for employees, it's important to empathize with their leaders. Yes, I totally agree, which is why we do leadership in flow, because I think we need to be kinder to our leaders, to our good leaders, to try to understand why they react the way they did. Because what we believe is that the good leaders are the ones who get criticized, the bad ones just get off. Last question before I pass it on to Ashok to say all the things that he wants to say, because otherwise he won't give me a chance, is tell me, when we talk about relationship matters, right? Let's look at an ideal situation,
Mhm.
right? Ideals of I don't last smile like that, Nash. It's not a trick question. We look at ideal situation. This ideal leader, ideal manager, ideal employee, right? Do you think that in terms of relationship, so the relationship between the manager and the employee is good, right?
Mhm.
Do you see? I don't know. We're talking about quiet quitters nowadays.
Mm.
People who are only delivering on the job, i.e., 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, but they're delivering on the job, don't want to go above that. If you
Yeah.
think we improved the relationship, and of course, talent retention is retaining them in the system, right? Do you see people succumbing to being a quiet quitter, i.e., I only give you as per my job description? Do you see what could happen? Yeah, just your opinion before I pass it on to Ashok.
So this is confirmed, right? So you mentioned in a very ideal situation, the
I did. Only
leaders
I did.
amazing, employees amazing, and they're quietly quitting. Would it happen?
So I'm
Would it
asking if
happen?
there was a relationship. That means if the leaders are doing all the things that they do, have a good relationship, understand what motivates the employee, engages them, gives them flexible working hours, listens well, all the things of the good leaders that you spoke about, and the
Yeah.
employee has the skills and has the right attitude,
All right.
right? Do you think it will impact the kind of quiet quitting that's happening? Because what's now the talk of the industry is the quiet quitting has increased by numbers, which is affecting
Mhm.
productivity.
Right. Personal opinion, yes, I think it would impact in a positive way. But I mean, look, I mean, the issue of people performing in a job 9 to 5 is not always. Yes, some people go above and beyond, right? That's great, right? But does 100% your workforce expected to do it? Probably not. I think you have to accept the fact that not 100% of your workforce is going to be going above and beyond, right? So this is where the whole question then exactly is: who is my high potential employee? Who's my mastery potential employee, right? So mastery
Mm,
potential people are there who go and sit down and get the job done, who are doers, right? And then you got the high potential people who are high flyers, who are ambitious, who want to get promoted quickly. So sometimes in any sort of workforce or team, you can't have all high flyers. You need some
nice.
mastery potential people. You need a good balance, right? So yes, it may impact, but it's not a huge negative thing. People just being there to do the job and do it well.
See, I told you I like Nash and I like his answers. You see, good choice. Thank you, Nash, because I love the way you help us differentiate. But the fact that as leaders we need to start thinking about what's our contribution to probably accelerate and increase the number of quiet quitters. And and
Sure.
I
Yeah.
and I think that was important. Thank you so much, Ashok. All yours now.
All right. I like the fact that you throw Nash to me at the end when there's no more time. We already
Voila,
hit
you got
7.
you got 5 7. Come on, we are Malaysia. Go.
No. Thank you very much, Nash. That's been actually very insightful for what
Thank
you've
you.
shared. If you can, I mean, I'm just going to wrap it up. But before we wrap it up, is there one growth advice that you can throw for candidates to stay longer in their jobs?
One advice, well, maybe a couple of areas. So one, I would say definitely is to have more patience. And
Okay.
not just at the employee candidate side, right? I think the patience needs to happen from both sides, of employee and employee. So when I say patience, I'm talking about when you take on a new job or you're excelling in your job you're holding right now, it takes time to grow and be successful,
Yep.
right? So you need time to really develop your skill sets. You need your time to get promoted, get rewarded. All that happens in a certain timeline, right?
Okay.
And while that's a case of being patient, you also need to be direct with your direct supervisor or boss and have a conversation about, okay, what exactly is my expectations here within my company? How
Sure.
soon can I get promoted? If it's not happening according to your timeline, those are conversations you need to struck up with your direct supervisor, right? Because yes, it's ideally the leader comes to employee and have the discussions, but sometimes I think employees also need to be much more direct with their bosses to voice
Right.
out their opinion. Hopefully that's the culture in that environment, but
Okay.
if that's the case, then I encourage them to do that.
Okay, nice. Thank you. And to wrap up the last question, then what is your one advice for hiring managers to retain talents?
Hiring managers, I would say definitely the alignment between HR and the business line managers needs to be
Nice.
improved. I think
Nice.
that's something that needs to be managed more
Yes.
effectively, because I think miscommunication happens quite often,
Sure.
at times. And so, certain SOPs, for example, when it comes to acquiring talent, retaining talent, for example, talent acquisition, right? It's all about speed. Right? How fast do we find the right person with the right skills? So also the expectations of hiring managers also needs to be modified, I would say. I'll use the analogy of, let's say, for example, it's a building, right? A building has 30 floors. And,
Okay.
you're taking a lift, and most clients, most of the time, start at 30th floor,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's where the expectations are, right? So we are fine. We are recruiters. We come into the 30th floor. We open the door. We go around. We look and scout that whole floor and see if there's right talent. If there's no one there, they got to bring it down to one level, 2 levels below, right? Drop it on 25th floor, 20th floor. You got to manage expectations to meet and compromise well.
Okay. All right. So thank you very much for that, Nash. I know it's 7:03, and thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing the importance of
Thank you.
alignment of values of candidates to organization. Thank you for sharing the importance of even looking into intrinsic motivation drivers and placing that within the organization. Thank you very much for really sharing the fact that there's a lot of soft skills that managers need to build for today and tomorrow, and even sharing about the importance of communication in being a very key driver, right, in retaining talents, right? So thank you so very much, Nash or
Thank
Avinash.
you, guys. Thank Ashok.
No
Thank you, Mala.
worries.
Really my
Mother,
pleasure.
you want to say goodbye?
Yeah. Thank you. I made the right choice, Nash. Thank you once again for saying yes and for being so committed to this program. Really, I really
Appreciate
appreciate
it.
it.
My
All
pleasure.
right. So as we say bye to Nash, and I'm very sure there's a lot that I take away as we
Yep,
say bye. Ashok, I hope you enjoyed
I did.
asking all of that questions. Right, I learned so
I
much.
love your question, power question.
I get excited because Nash was so cute when he looked up. I go, okay, he's thinking. Because if he's not thinking, that means the question was too easy.
Exactly.
We
Yeah,
haven't hit it, right? So
that's
when
right.
he did that, I got excited, lah. But and then you saw. So, but I learned as usual a lot from Nash, and I really admire his commitment to the show. I think you know that pre and post,
Mhm.
and the same with you. So, Ashok, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Until we meet again next week, same time,
Next week. All right.
same place, and a different topic. Because next week it will only be both of us, right?
And we are doing a wrap up of all the guests this month, right? And
Correct.
how
So
they
next
had contributed to the talent retention subject.
Correct. And we will
Nice.
be sharing some data with you as to how to make that into practical application in leadership inflow. So join us next week, same time, me and Ashok, and and we'll have another interesting conversation. With that, good night and
Good night.
goodbye.
Bye bye.